On the distant world of Virelia, under the bright glow of twin suns, a human diplomat named Marcus stepped off his ship and into the Grand Palace. It was a place of beauty and mystery, filled with alien structures that seemed to touch the sky. Virelia was a planet full of strange wonders, and Marcus had been sent here to represent Earth in diplomatic talks with the Virelian Empire. But today, Marcus wasn't here to negotiate peace or trade agreements. He had been summoned for a different reason entirely. Princess Adira, the heir to the Virelian throne, had issued a challenge that had been talked about for months. "Guess my name, and I'll marry you," she had declared in a message sent to every ambassador and noble who visited Virelia. It sounded like a game at first, a joke even. But the princess wasn't known for her sense of humor. Her reputation for wit and intelligence had earned her both admiration and fear across the galaxy. No one had ever been able to guess her name, and those who tried were sent away humiliated. But Marcus wasn't afraid of her. He wasn't here to win her heart, not really. He had heard the rumors, of course. How many had come before him, each one trying their luck. Some of them were noblemen and diplomats, well known and respected, yet they had failed, and most never returned. But Marcus wasn't like them. He wasn't trying to impress her, he was simply curious. The palace was a mix of modern architecture and ancient Virelian designs, with high arches and walls covered in shimmering alien patterns. Marcus walked through the hallways, his boots echoing off the stone floor, as he was led to the throne room. There at the center sat Princess Adira, surrounded by her advisors and guards. She was striking, with silver hair that seemed to glow, her eyes dark like the deepest part of space. She sat tall and proud on her throne, her posture perfect, her smile confident. "So, you're the human who thinks he can guess my name," she said, her voice smooth and melodic, carrying a hint of amusement. Marcus stepped forward, unfazed by the pressure. He had dealt with diplomats and rulers of all kinds, but this was different. There was something in the air, something more than just the game. He could feel it, a tension that was both playful and serious. "I'm here to try, Your Highness," Marcus said, bowing slightly but keeping his gaze steady. The princess raised an eyebrow, clearly entertained. "Then let's begin," she said, her tone dripping with challenge. "You get one guess. If you guess right, I'll marry you. If not, you'll leave here the same as all the others." The room fell silent. The stakes were high, and the challenge was one of a kind. Marcus could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on him. He took a deep breath and thought for a moment. This wasn't just about guessing a name. It was about understanding who Adira was, what lay behind that confident exterior. And so he stepped forward, his voice steady and clear. "Is it Athelia?" Princess Adira's smile remained, but it was clear from her eyes that it was wrong. She shook her head slowly. "No," she said softly, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "But nice try. You'll need to do better than that." The room was quiet except for the soft rustling of the guards' uniforms as they shifted on their feet. Princess Adira's smile remained, but it was clear that Marcus's first guess had been wrong. Yet he did not feel embarrassed. In fact, he felt more intrigued than before. There was something about her, something mysterious, that he couldn't ignore. The princess leaned back in her throne, the golden fabric of her gown flowing elegantly over her seat. Her eyes sparkled with a playful glint, but there was a deeper emotion hidden behind that mischievous look. Marcus could feel it, though he couldn't quite name it. It was as if there was a part of her that longed for someone to truly understand her, beyond the game and the title of princess. "Well, guess again," she said, her voice light, teasing, but with an edge of challenge. Marcus took a step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. He didn't want to play the guessing game as the others had. They had been distracted by her beauty, by the idea of winning her hand, but Marcus was different. His mind was not on winning. It was on her, on Adira. He wanted to understand why she'd issued such a challenge in the first place, why her name mattered so much to her. He paused, his gaze flickering around the grand room. It was filled with ancient tapestries, delicate sculptures, and towering columns that seemed to stretch toward the stars. The room itself seemed to hold centuries of history, all watching them. He glanced back at the princess, who was watching him carefully, a slight smile playing on her lips. "I'll guess again," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Is it Alara?" The room grew still once more, the silence hanging thick in the air. For a moment, Marcus thought he saw something in the princess's eyes, a flicker of surprise. But just as quickly as it appeared, the look disappeared, replaced by the familiar smirk. "No, that's still not it," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You're persistent, I'll give you that." Marcus stood tall, unshaken by her rejection. He wasn't discouraged. He had expected this, but he was also starting to feel like he was getting closer, even though she had said nothing to confirm it. Every time she rejected his guess, it seemed as though she was pushing him further into her world, and it made him even more curious. The princess leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing with interest. "Tell me, human, what makes you think you can guess my name?" Marcus took a moment to answer, feeling the weight of her question. He wasn't sure how to explain it, but he decided to be honest. "Maybe it's because you're not like the others," he said, his voice calm and sincere. "You don't just want someone to guess your name. You want someone who sees beyond the challenge. You want someone who understands you, not just the title you carry." There was a brief silence. The room seemed to hold its breath as the princess studied him, her expression unreadable. For the first time, Adira's smile softened, and she gave a small nod. "You may be right," she said quietly, "but I'm afraid that my name is more than just something that can be guessed." Marcus met her gaze, his mind racing with the weight of her words. What did she mean? Why was her name so important? And what did it have to do with the fate of Aurelia? Before he could ask another question, the princess stood up from her throne, her eyes glimmering with both challenge and something more, perhaps a hint of hope. "Keep guessing, diplomat," she said with a twinkle in her eye. "And maybe you'll understand why my name is more than a game." The days passed quickly, each one bringing a new guess, a new failure. Marcus didn't mind. With each rejection, he felt as though he was getting closer, understanding the princess a little more. She had become something of a puzzle, a mystery that only seemed to deepen the more he got to know her. Every time he guessed wrong, the princess would smile, half amusement, half something else, something he couldn't quite place. Yet, behind that smile, Marcus noticed something different. There were times when her laughter faded into silence, her gaze drifting far away as though her mind was elsewhere. During those moments, he could see the weight on her shoulders, the loneliness in her eyes. It was as if she was playing a game not only with him, but with herself, hiding a truth she was afraid to face. The royal palace, grand and beautiful as it was, seemed to echo with that same emptiness. Adira was surrounded by advisors, guards, and servants, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that she was always alone. No one truly saw her. They all saw the princess, the heir to the throne, the mysterious beauty with a challenge no one could solve. But Marcus wasn't interested in the title. He wanted to know the woman behind it. One afternoon, while the sun dipped low in the sky, Marcus found himself alone with the princess in one of the palace's quieter chambers. She had invited him for a private conversation, though she had not explained why. As they stood by the large window, looking out over the sprawling gardens of Aurelia, Marcus decided to speak his mind. "You don't have to keep playing the game, you know," he said, his voice soft. "You don't have to hide behind this challenge." The princess glanced at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she didn't speak, and Marcus thought perhaps she hadn't heard him. But then, she turned her eyes toward him, and for the first time, he saw something other than the playful mask she always wore. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual, the usual edge gone. Marcus hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "You're not just testing me, Adira. You're testing yourself. You hide behind your name, but I think there's more to it than just a game. The princess stiffened slightly at the mention of her name, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she crossed her arms, as if guarding herself from the truth he had just spoken. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her tone defensive, but there was a flicker of something. Vulnerability, perhaps. This game is just for fun. It's tradition. It's nothing more. Marcus stepped closer, careful not to invade her space but determined to be heard. I don't believe that. You've spent your whole life being a princess, Adura. You've been told what to do, what to be. I think you're looking for something real, something beyond the crown and the title. Her gaze flickered away, her eyes focused on the distant horizon. For a long moment, there was only silence between them. Marcus watched her, waiting. Finally, she spoke, her voice almost a whisper. You're right, she admitted softly. It's not just about a name. My name is part of a prophecy. It's something that could change everything for my people. Marcus's heart raced as he heard the words, a prophecy. What did that mean? Was her name tied to something far greater than he had ever imagined? What prophecy? He asked, his voice filled with curiosity and concern. The princess shook her head slowly, as if unsure whether she should say more. I can't tell you yet. Not until I know you're truly ready for the truth. Marcus took a deep breath, knowing he had reached a turning point. He wasn't just playing a guessing game anymore. He had stumbled upon something deeper, something that could shape the future of Varelia, and maybe even his own future. But he was ready to learn. He had to know the truth. I'm ready, he said firmly, his eyes locking with hers. Whatever it is, I want to understand. I want to help. For the first time since they had met, Adura didn't smile. She didn't laugh. Instead, she looked at him with a mixture of fear and something else. Hope. Then keep guessing, she said softly. And maybe you'll uncover the truth. The days grew warmer as the suns of Varelia bathed the palace in a soft golden light. Marcus had become a regular visitor to the princess's chambers. Though the guessing game continued, there was a new quietness between them. It was no longer just about guessing her name. It was about understanding her, uncovering the hidden truths that lay beneath the princess's public facade. The more time he spent with Adura, the more he saw the weight of the crown on her shoulders. She wasn't just a princess. She was the future of Varelia, the key to a prophecy that could change the fate of an entire world. But the pressure of that destiny seemed to trap her, like a bird caught in a cage. The real Adura, the one with dreams and fears, was buried behind the royal duties and the challenges she had set before her suitors. One afternoon, as they sat together in a quiet garden, Adura seemed lost in thought, her gaze distant as she stared at the flowers that bloomed in every shade imaginable. Marcus sat beside her, his legs crossed on the soft grass, watching her with growing curiosity. He had stopped making guesses for a while, feeling that the game had shifted. It was no longer just about the name. It was about understanding the woman who hid behind it. You've been quiet today, Marcus said, breaking the silence. His voice was casual, but there was a hint of concern in his words. Is everything all right? The princess turned her gaze toward him, her eyes soft, though still guarded. She took a deep breath before answering, her voice quiet but steady. It's the prophecy, she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I never wanted it to be true, but now, it's becoming harder to ignore. Marcus leaned in slightly, intrigued. This was the first time she had spoken about the prophecy so openly. What do you mean? He asked, his voice calm but full of interest. How does your name fit into all of this? Adura hesitated for a moment, her fingers playing with a delicate flower she had picked. The prophecy speaks of a union between two worlds, Varelia and another, she explained slowly. It says that when a name is revealed, the two worlds will merge in a way they never have before. It's a powerful force, one that could bring peace or destroy everything. Marcus could see the weight in her eyes as she spoke. He had known the princess carried the burden of her title, but hearing about this prophecy made him realize just how much more she had been hiding. This was more than a challenge. It was a force that shaped the very future of her people. "So your name is the key?" Marcus asked, trying to make sense of what she was saying. "If I guess it, if I reveal it, everything could change." Adira nodded, her expression distant, as though she were speaking more to herself than to him. "Yes, but I'm not ready to face what might come with it. My people, they depend on this prophecy. But it's a dangerous thing. If the wrong person finds out my name, it could bring war instead of peace." Marcus's heart raced as he listened. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. What had started as a simple guessing game was now tied to the fate of an entire planet. But there was more to it than that. Adira wasn't just worried about the prophecy. She was worried about herself. The weight of her name wasn't just a royal duty. It was a personal fear, a fear that had kept her locked in the game for so long. "You don't have to do this alone," Marcus said softly, his words filled with sincerity. "Whatever happens, I'll be by your side. You don't have to hide behind the game anymore." Adira's eyes met his, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something. Hope, perhaps. She didn't smile, but her expression softened, the walls she had built around herself beginning to crack. "I wish I could believe that," she said quietly. "But the prophecy is bigger than both of us. I'm not sure anyone can stop it." Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder gently, offering a sense of comfort she had never known. "Then let's find out together," he said with a quiet resolve. "One step at a time." As they sat in the fading light of the garden, the game had shifted again. It was no longer just about guessing a name. It was about understanding the future of Virelia, and whether a single name could truly change everything. The days seemed to blur together as Marcus continued his visits to the royal palace. The guessing game, once a challenge that made him feel like an outsider, had now transformed into something more. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about understanding. Understanding Adira, understanding the prophecy, and understanding the responsibility that came with both. As the weeks passed, Marcus found himself growing more attached to the princess. She was no longer just a ruler to him. She was someone with hopes, fears, and dreams, just like anyone else. And despite the weight of her destiny, she still held on to a spark of something that made her real, something that made her more than just the crown she wore. One evening, as the twin suns of Virelia began to set, Marcus and Adira sat together in a quiet part of the palace garden. The air was cool, the sky painted with hues of orange and purple. It was a peaceful moment, one where the noise of the palace seemed to fade away. Adira was unusually quiet, her eyes focused on the sky, as though searching for something hidden in the clouds. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, breaking the silence, "if the prophecy is just a way to control me? A way to make me fit into a mold that I don't belong in?" Marcus glanced at her, his brow furrowing. "I think the prophecy is more than that. It's a path, not a cage. But I understand why you feel trapped. When you're given a destiny, it can feel like you don't have a choice anymore." Adira sighed deeply, her fingers playing with the petals of a flower. "You don't know how many times I've wished I could just walk away from all of it. Find a place where no one knows me, where I'm just me, not the princess, not the future queen, just Adira." Marcus nodded slowly, his heart aching for her. He had always seen her as a strong, untouchable figure, but now he understood the vulnerability she kept hidden so well. The weight of her name, of the prophecy, was crushing her, and no one had truly seen it until now. "Maybe you don't have to walk away," Marcus said quietly. "Maybe you just need to choose your own path. One that's not defined by the prophecy, but by what you truly want." Adira looked at him, her eyes wide, as though she had never considered that before. The idea of choice, real choice, was something that had been taken from her long ago. She had always been told what was expected of her. She had never been allowed to dream of a life beyond the prophecy. For the first time, a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. It was a smile that spoke of hope, of something that had been buried deep inside her for a long time. "I don't know if I can," she said softly, "but I want to believe I can." Marcus leaned forward, his voice firm yet gentle. "You can. You don't have to carry the burden alone. Whatever happens with the prophecy, we can face it together." The words hung in the air between them, a promise, a vow. Adira was no longer alone in her struggle. She had Marcus, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could change the future together. Later that night, as they walked back to the palace, Marcus couldn't help but feel that the guessing game had transformed into something much more important. It wasn't just about her name anymore. It was about their journey together, and the future they could create. And maybe, just maybe, he was getting closer to the truth, not through guessing her name, but through understanding the woman who had hidden so much of herself behind it. The palace was abuzz with excitement. News had spread throughout Varelia that a new suitor had arrived. He wasn't just any noble or wealthy landowner. He was Prince Alaron, a high-ranking member of the royal council and one of the most powerful men on the planet. The Vairilian court had whispered about his arrival for days, and now he had come to try his luck at winning the heart of Princess Adira. Marcus felt a tight knot form in his stomach as he heard the news. Until now, the guessing game had been his alone. It had been a quiet, personal journey, one that allowed him to grow closer to Adira, to understand her in ways no one else had. But now, everything was changing. Alaron wasn't just a competitor, he was a threat. He had the wealth, the power, and the connections that could make him a strong contender. Marcus had none of those things. He was just a human diplomat, someone who had no claim to the throne and no influence in Varelia's politics. In a way, he had never felt more out of place. The day Alaron arrived at the palace, Marcus noticed a shift in the atmosphere. The air seemed charged with tension, as if the entire court was holding its breath, waiting to see how this new player would change the game. Adira, ever composed, welcomed Prince Alaron with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Marcus watched from a distance as the two exchanged pleasantries, his heart sinking with every word. Later that evening, during the royal feast, Marcus found himself seated at the far end of the table, his thoughts racing. The feast was filled with laughter and music, but it all seemed distant to him. His eyes kept darting to the princess, who sat at the head of the table, talking with Alaron. They were engaged in a conversation that seemed more serious than the lighthearted chatter surrounding them. Marcus couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. He knew that his connection with Adira was deeper than anything she shared with Alaron, but there was a certain confidence in the prince's demeanor that made Marcus feel small in comparison. Alaron spoke with authority, as though he was used to getting what he wanted, and it was clear that he had set his sights on the princess. Adira, however, remained composed. She answered his questions politely, but Marcus noticed something in her eyes. It was a flicker of uncertainty, a shadow of discomfort. She wasn't enjoying the conversation as much as she was pretending to. As the evening wore on, Adira caught Marcus's eye across the room. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile, as though to reassure him. But even that smile didn't erase the unease that had settled in his chest. After the feast, Marcus found a quiet corner of the palace garden to think. He wasn't sure what to do. The game had changed, and he couldn't ignore the reality of it. Prince Alaron was everything that Marcus wasn't: wealthy, influential, and powerful. But there was one thing Alaron didn't have: Marcus's understanding of Adira. He had spent weeks getting to know her, uncovering her layers, and learning the truth behind her walls. That bond was something no amount of money or status could replace. As Marcus stood in the quiet garden, the night air cool against his skin, he made a decision. He would continue to play the game, not for the princess's hand, but for her. He wasn't going to let Alaron, or anyone else, steal her away from the life she deserved. He wasn't going to give up on her. Not now. The palace had grown quieter since Prince Alaron's arrival. The once lively halls, filled with music and laughter, now seemed tense, as if the entire court was waiting for something to happen. Marcus had spent the last few days avoiding the main gathering areas, choosing instead to walk through the palace gardens or sit in the quiet corners of the royal library. He needed time to think, to sort through his feelings, but no matter how much he tried, his thoughts always returned to Adira. As the days passed, he noticed something about the princess. She had been quieter, her smiles more forced, her eyes distant. The spark that had once filled her whenever they were together seemed to dim, replaced by a shadow that she couldn't quite hide. Marcus knew it had nothing to do with him. He had grown to understand her well enough to know that this was something deeper. The arrival of Prince Alaran had shifted the balance in the palace, and Adira, once the confident, playful princess, now seemed to be struggling with a storm of emotions. One evening, after a long day of court matters, Marcus found himself walking along the palace balcony. The twin suns had set, leaving a sky filled with countless stars. It was a peaceful night, but the tension in the air still hung heavy. He had just finished a meeting with a few of the royal advisors when he spotted Adira walking toward him from the shadows of the garden. "Marcus," she said softly, her voice carrying a mix of warmth and sadness. "I was hoping to find you." Marcus turned toward her, a sense of calm washing over him at the sight of her. "I've been avoiding everyone," he admitted with a slight smile. "But I'm glad you found me." Adira paused in front of him, her eyes searching his face as though looking for something. Perhaps reassurance, perhaps understanding. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her voice quieter than usual. "About not having to follow the prophecy's path, about having a choice." Marcus nodded, waiting patiently. He could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the conflict she was battling inside. "I don't know if I can do it," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "The prophecy, my name, it's all I've ever known. I spent my life preparing for this role, for the moment when my name would be revealed, and everything would change. But I'm not sure I'm ready. I don't know if I ever will be." Marcus stepped closer, his heart aching for her. He had seen the weight of the crown in her eyes, the pressure she had carried her entire life. She wasn't just a princess. She was a symbol of hope, of destiny. And that kind of responsibility was suffocating. "You don't have to carry that weight alone," he said gently, his voice steady. "You're more than just a prophecy, Adira. You're a person with dreams, with desires, and with the right to choose your own future." Tears welled up in Adira's eyes, but she quickly blinked them away, refusing to let them fall. She was strong, stronger than anyone gave her credit for, but the burden of her role had worn her down. "I've always been afraid," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "Afraid that if I choose my own path, I'll fail. Afraid that the future of Virelia depends on me. And if I fail, everything will fall apart." Marcus reached out, gently placing a hand on her arm. "You won't fail. You're not alone. You have a choice, and I'll stand by you, no matter what happens." For the first time in a long while, Adira allowed herself to truly relax, the tension in her shoulders easing as she let out a deep breath. The walls she had built around herself seemed to crack just a little. She smiled softly, a faint but genuine smile. And for a moment, Marcus could see the girl behind the crown. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time, I think I'm ready to find out." In that quiet moment, Marcus knew that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. The prophecy still loomed over them, and Prince Alaran was still a threat. But he also knew that, whatever happened, he and Adira would face it together. The days seemed to stretch on longer as the tension in the palace continued to rise. Marcus had spent weeks with Adira, learning more about her fears, her hopes, and the prophecy that had shaped her life. But the guessing game, once lighthearted and full of laughter, had now become something much more serious. It wasn't just about guessing her name anymore. It was about understanding her, and in many ways, it was about understanding the future of Virelia itself. Marcus knew the stakes had never been higher. The prophecy had been clear. The revelation of Adira's name would bring about a momentous change. What that change would be, no one knew for sure. Some believed it would bring peace to their world. Others feared it would bring war. But one thing was certain. Adira's name was the key to everything. As the days passed, Marcus's guesses had grown more thoughtful, more deliberate. He no longer relied on guesses based on logic or tradition. Instead, he listened to the whispers of her heart, the quiet clues she had unknowingly given him. Each rejection of his guess was like another puzzle piece falling into place, but he still hadn't figured out the final piece. One evening, as the stars began to twinkle in the sky above Virilia, Marcus found himself standing alone on the balcony, looking out at the quiet expanse of the palace grounds. The air was cool, but he didn't mind. His thoughts were a storm of their own, a mix of uncertainty and determination. He had made so many guesses, each one a step closer to the truth, but still not the right one. Footsteps broke through his thoughts, and he turned to see Adira walking toward him. She looked tired, but there was something different about her tonight, something in the way she held herself, as if she were finally ready to confront the truth. "I've been thinking," she said softly, her voice carrying over the quiet night air, "about the game. About everything." Marcus met her gaze, his heart beating a little faster. "What about it?" She hesitated, looking out at the stars for a moment before turning back to him. "I've been hiding behind my name for so long. It's all I've ever known, and I've been afraid to let it go. But now, I'm not so sure anymore. I'm not sure I can keep running from it." Marcus stepped closer, his voice gentle. "You don't have to run anymore, Adira. You've spent so much of your life hiding, but now you can choose. You can decide who you want to be." Adira smiled softly, but it was tinged with sadness. "I've never been able to do that before, but maybe I can. Now." The moment stretched between them, and for the first time, Marcus felt like they were both standing at the edge of something bigger than either of them. It was a crossroads, a choice that neither of them could avoid any longer. With a deep breath, Marcus turned to face her fully. "I think I know your name now. I think I finally understand." Adira looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "Do you?" He nodded, his voice steady. "Yes. It's not just a name, is it? It's everything you've been hiding. Everything you've been afraid to face. The prophecy, the future, the person you are. It all comes down to this." He took a step forward, his heart in his chest. "Your name is Nyla." Adira's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, there was only silence. The world seemed to hold its breath as her eyes widened in surprise. "That's," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "That's correct." The truth hung in the air, heavy and momentous. Adira's name was Nyla, and with that revelation, the weight of the prophecy, the future of Virilia, and the bond between them seemed to shift. Marcus felt something change between them, a quiet understanding, a connection that went deeper than he had ever expected. Adira stepped closer to him, her expression softening. "You've done it," she whispered. "You've unlocked the truth." Marcus smiled, his heart racing. "But this isn't the end, Adira. It's just the beginning." And for the first time in a long time, Adira believed him. With the name revealed, she knew that the future was no longer something to fear, it was something to shape. And with Marcus by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. The quiet stillness that followed the revelation of Adira's name felt almost unreal. The palace, once full of whispers and uncertainty, now seemed to breathe with a new energy, one that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Marcus stood beside Adira, his heart still racing, but in a way that was different now. It wasn't fear or doubt. It was something else. It was hope. Hope that they could face whatever came next, together. Adira, or Nyla, as she had revealed herself to be, stood in front of him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Her eyes, once filled with a guarded uncertainty, now sparkled with something that hadn't been there before. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her shoulders, but at the same time, a new burden had settled in its place. "Now that you know," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of the moment, "everything will change. It's not just about my name anymore. The prophecy, it's real. The fate of Verelia depends on what happens next." Marcus looked at her, his thoughts racing. He had known the stakes, of course. The prophecy had been a part of their lives from the very beginning, something that hovered over them like a shadow. But now, the truth was clear. Adira's name, Nyla, was the key to the prophecy, and it would unlock the future of her world. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice steady, but filled with the urgency of the situation. Nyla looked out across the palace grounds, as though searching for an answer in the vast expanse of the world. "I'm not sure. The prophecy speaks of a union, a joining of two worlds. But it doesn't say who that union must be with. It only says that the one who guesses my name will play a role in the future." But now, she paused, her voice faltering slightly. "I'm afraid of what that role might be." Marcus moved closer, his hand gently resting on her arm. "We'll figure it out. Together. We don't have to follow the prophecy blindly. We can make our own choices." Her eyes met his, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. In that look, Marcus sought everything. The fear, the uncertainty, but also the strength. Nyla had been carrying the weight of this prophecy for her entire life. But now, she wasn't alone. "You've always believed in me," Nyla said, her voice barely a whisper, "even when I couldn't believe in myself." Marcus smiled softly, squeezing her arm. "I believe in you, Nyla, and I believe that the future isn't set in stone. We have the power to change it. You don't have to be trapped by a prophecy." Nyla took a deep breath, the weight of his words settling inside her. She had spent so long hiding behind her name, behind the expectations that had been placed on her. But now, with Marcus by her side, she felt like she could finally step into the future she had always wanted, but never believed was possible. Suddenly, a voice broke through the quiet. "Nyla, Marcus." They turned to see Prince Alaron approaching, his face serious. Behind him stood a group of royal guards. It was clear that something had changed, and the atmosphere around them was shifting once again. Alaron's gaze flickered between Nyla and Marcus, his expression unreadable. "I need to speak with you both," Alaron said, his tone commanding. Nyla's stomach twisted. She knew that this moment, the moment of truth, wasn't going to be easy. The prophecy had brought them this far, but now they had to face the consequences of the choices they would make. There was no turning back. Marcus stood by her side, unwavering. "We're ready," he said, his voice firm. As they walked toward the prince, Nyla felt the weight of everything she had learned in the past few days. Her name, the prophecy, and the future. But for the first time in her life, she didn't feel alone. She had Marcus. And together, they would face whatever challenges came next. The atmosphere in the palace had shifted again, this time more intensely than before. Marcus and Nyla walked side by side, their steps in sync as they approached Prince Alaron. His serious expression told them that whatever he had to say, it wasn't good news. The royal guard stood silently behind him, their eyes sharp, their presence commanding. Nyla felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach as she looked at Alaron. She had known that this moment would come, that the truth about her name would inevitably lead to consequences, but she hadn't expected the tension to feel so heavy, so immediate. Alaron's eyes flickered to Nyla, then to Marcus before he spoke. "Your Highness," he began, his voice carrying an air of authority. "I have just received word from the Royal Council. There is a gathering storm, both within Verelia and beyond. The revelation of your name, Nyla. It has set off a chain of events that cannot be undone." Nyla's heart raced. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice quiet but filled with urgency. "What chain of events?" Alaron's gaze sharpened as he stepped closer, his tone growing more serious. Your name has always been the key to the prophecy, but there are factions within Virilia who believe that this prophecy must be controlled. They will stop at nothing to ensure that the future is shaped according to their vision, not yours. Nyla felt a chill run down her spine. She had always known that her name was tied to a prophecy, but she had never imagined that it could spark such dangerous power struggles. She turned to Marcus, seeking reassurance, but his face was just as tense. He squeezed her hand gently, silently telling her that they were in this together. "And what do you want, Prince Alaron?" Marcus asked, his voice calm but firm. He was clearly trying to assess the situation, but there was an underlying sense of suspicion in his words. Alaron's eyes narrowed. "What I want," he said, "is to ensure the future of Virilia. And that future requires a united front. It's not just your name, Nyla. It's the future of the entire planet. If the Rom people control the prophecy, they could bring ruin to us all." Nyla's mind raced. The weight of her name, the prophecy, and the power struggles of the royal court all seemed to collide in that moment. She had never asked for this responsibility, never imagined that she would be the center of so much attention, so much conflict. She felt overwhelmed. "Then what should we do?" she asked, her voice shaky. Alaron's gaze softened for a moment. "You have a choice, Nyla. You can either allow the council to control the prophecy, guiding the future according to their plans, or you can take control of your own destiny. But be warned, taking control won't be easy. There will be those who oppose you." Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady and strong. "And if we choose to take control?" Alaron's eyes flickered, and for a moment, it seemed like he was debating something. Finally, he spoke. "Then you will face the consequences. The prophecy will become real, and your future, our future, will be in your hands. You won't be able to hide behind your name anymore. But there will be a price." Nyla looked at Marcus, then back at Alaron. She felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her. This was no longer just about guessing a name. It was about the future of Virilia, about what kind of ruler she wanted to be, and whether she could handle the responsibility of that future. "I've spent my whole life hiding behind this name," Nyla said, her voice steady now. "But I'm not afraid anymore. I will choose my own future." Marcus smiled, pride filling his heart. "Together," he said simply, his words full of meaning. Alaron nodded, his expression hardening. "Then you've made your choice. But remember, the path ahead is dangerous. There are those who will fight you at every turn." Nyla stood tall, no longer the uncertain princess, but a woman ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. "Let them try," she said, her voice filled with determination. "I'm ready." As they walked away from Alaron, the weight of the future settled on their shoulders, but it was no longer a burden. It was a path they would walk together, no matter what the world threw at them. The prophecy was no longer just about her name. It was about who she would become. And with Marcus by her side, Nyla knew she could face whatever came next.